there guys, how are we doing? My name's Boomy and you're watching my channel Boomy Reactions. Now today guys, I think we have a bit of a history kind of video that I'd like to share with y'all. So today's video has been requested by one of my lovely patrons yet again. This one has been requested by Joe Crazy. You always suggest the best videos, Joe. So Joe says, this next Wendigoon video is about the tragic story of Chris McCandless, a young man who decided to explore the wild American wilderness, but met an unfortunate end. Oh no! I have not heard of this explorer. I wonder why. For our cousins over in the US, is this a name that you recognise from the textbooks, from your school days? I've never heard of him. The name McCandless is familiar, but I think I'm thinking of a fictional character from the book and film. Is it Poor Things with Emma Stone? Max McCandless. I think he's a fictional character. Totally off topic. Anyway, right. Okay, so he fell off the edge of the world, not literally, figuratively speaking, so he just vanished. Well, exploring the vast wilderness of America, you know, I imagine this was quite a while ago as well. There are probably an infinite amount of ways that, you know, someone could go missing or something could happen to them, especially if it's such like a vast wilderness. And again, I imagine we've got a little thumbnail here. So yes, I imagine this was maybe like a few hundred years ago. Might be totally wrong. Anyway, let's get on with the video, and I'm sure all of my questions, my many questions, are going to be answered. And guys, if you are enjoying these reactions, consider liking and subscribing. Thank you so much, my lovelies. Oh, I'm off on one today. Can't get all my words out. If you're interested, I have a Buy Me a Coffee account. That link is over here. And if you would like to help support my channel any further, I have a Patreon account. And if you want to check that out at all, that link is in the description, just below there. I'm going to have to start talking more slowly because I think my mouth moves quicker than my brain.
Hello everybody, today we are going to be talking about the man who stepped out of society and into the wilderness. And that man is Chris McCandless. Chris McCandless is a character that I've known about for a while now, and I've kept waiting for an excuse to talk about him, like maybe he'd show up in an iceberg or a missing persons thing or something like that, but I got tired of waiting and decided I'll just do a standalone video. Especially considering that after I just got done with all the serial killer stuff and the 3-hour tree video, and before I get into finishing the conspiracy iceberg, this will be the closest thing I take to a vacation.
3-hour long tree video. I love Wendigoon's passion. he talks a lot like me. Because when you're passionate about things, you want to explain every thought going through your head, and you're interested in what other people have to say. And I get it, and I love your videos, Wendigoon. I love them.
As a quick summary, in case you're still wondering if you're interested in this topic or not, Chris McCandless gave up his earthly possessions and simply began to brave the wilderness on his own. Eventually, he found his way into the Alaskan wilderness and chronicled the end of his life through a journal and several pictures. He has become the focus of many documentaries, TV specials, and even a book that was later adapted into a movie by Sean Penn called Into the Wild.
How have I not heard about Chris McCandless? We've established I live under a rock. How? I've not seen this film.
And to be honest, this is a story that's always resonated with me, and I want to talk about it, so we're going to do just that. We are going to go ahead and get into it, but as always, thank you for watching. Chris McCandless was born on February the 12th of 1968 in El Segundo, California, to his parents, Walt and Billy McCandless.
It's hilarious how wrong I am. I swear, I looked at the thumbnail and I saw Chris McCandless, and I obviously didn't look very hard because I thought he was kind of dressed in like, you know, furs, like a bit like a kind of like a frontiersman or something. Okay, Boomy, so wrong. Okay, this is within recent memory.
He was the oldest of 2 siblings, only having one sister, Corrine, who was born shortly thereafter, along with 6 half-siblings from his father's previous marriage. Okay. When Chris was 8 years old, his family moved from California to Virginia, and his father began working at NASA. From the outside looking in, it seemed like the McCandless were a perfect family. They had 2 kids, they went to church on Sundays, the dad had a successful job, the whole family was very wealthy, and it fit the description of a nuclear family. However, this has been contested in recent years, due in large part to Chris's younger sister, Corrine. I said in the beginning that the story of Chris was eventually adapted into the book Into the Wild.
What? So not the stereotypically happy suburban kind of family because of his sister. What happened?
Well, his sister also put out a book titled The Wild Truth. In the book, The Wild Truth, Corrine said that behind closed doors, her father was very abusive. More specifically, that he was an alcoholic and would often physically hurt the children whenever he became drunk. During these violent outbursts, Corrine said that Chris would always protect her from her father, and it was most likely one of the reasons that Chris eventually did what he did. Now, in the sake of fairness, I want to say that both Walt and Billy McCandless have said that this is entirely made up by Corrine and is incredibly exaggerated as a means of garnering attention.
Why? Yeah. I'm sure there are a handful of people that may make things like this up for attention, but I don't think they're a rule. I think they're an exception. Why on earth would this young woman lie? You don't all of a sudden wake up one day and on a whim decide to tell everyone that your father was really an abusive drunk for all of your childhood. Not to discredit anybody, but you don't lie about things like that.
However, those half-siblings that I mentioned earlier have come to Corrine's side and said that her father was in fact abusive, and I'm not going to cast stones one way or the other. You all can come to that conclusion on your own. I'm just highlighting it to give a possible motive for why Chris went on this journey. Another detail is that from a young age, Chris was particularly obsessed with Jack London's Call of the Wild, and the idea of a man venturing out into the wilderness in order to take back the roots of living was something that personally resonated with him. In 1986, Chris graduated from Woodson High in Fairfax, Virginia. And something else I want to bring up is that in a lot of the biographies or journal entries you see about Chris, a lot of people kind of poke at him for being a social outcast or always being different than everyone, and why people who knew him in life said that he was certainly a different guy who marched to the beat of his own drum. He was by no means an outcast.
I don't know why you would raise that about. Well, are they saying he's a bit of a hermit? I'm not surprised he went out on his own and ventured into the wild. So what? So some people are just slightly more introverted.
Classmates would go on to say later that everyone loved Chris and that he was a great friend to everybody and always had an upbeat personality. He was also the captain of the cross-country team, and during several of the meets or practices they would do, Chris would tell his teammates that they should feel like they were running against the world or running from all of the darkness in the world. So while he was certainly different, he was by no means a social reject. In the summer of 1986, shortly after graduating high school, Chris went back to California to meet several members of his family. While there, he learned that his father was previously bigamous with his mother. In other words, he found out that his father was married to his first wife at the same time that he was married to Chris's mother.
I mean, not that it illegitimizes children or, marriages these days, but that is still naughty and sucks and bad man.
According to Corrine, this had a profound effect on him and served to further disillusion him with the idea of family and society at large. I watched a documentary that talked to a lot of the family members about Chris, and in it, I kind of got the vibe that Chris felt there was a hypocrisy in his family particularly. In a lot of the letters that he would write to his sister, Chris would talk about how his dad would be so happy and loving one day and then violent and angry the next, and how sometimes his mom would be so caring and concerned about his life, and then other times she would be cold and quiet. This is something in his own writings later Chris would repeatedly shun, the idea of being two different people at the same time. Something else that I gathered from the documentary, as well as several of Chris's letters, is that he was particularly put off by the idea of material possessions. More specifically, it seems that his parents, who were quite wealthy, would try to buy his trust or buy his happiness with things, and Chris didn't much care for that. In high school, Chris became a door-to-door salesman and eventually saved enough money to buy a cheap car. Whenever Chris was in college, his parents bought him a much nicer car, but he refused it because he felt like, for one, he didn't earn it, and two, he didn't want to take another gift from them.
I mean, he's got a will of steel, hasn't he? I think most people might be quite tempted by the car, even if you weren't really going to talk to your parents anymore, or it's not going to make you love them anymore. I think a lot of people would just be tempted to be like, okay, thank you, bye. No, okay, he's very set on his morals, very good moral compass here, almost to the degree of stubbornness.
Doreen even said at one point Chris came to her and said, I know you want to go to college, but whatever you do, do not take more money from mom and dad. And this may just be kind of a biased interpretation, so feel free to ignore this part. But in the documentary was called Return to the Wild, by the way. In Return to the Wild, I'm not going to say if definitively I think the father was abusive or not, or whatever. That's up to the family. They're the only ones who will ever know for sure, blah, blah, blah. However, I feel like watching it, there was a material characteristic to the parents that seemed to be the kind of thing Chris was running from.
Yeah, like it literally repulsed him because it almost reminded him of his parents.
In other words, in a lot of Chris's letters and writings, he talked about how possessions slow people down and everyone's so concerned about money this and money that and blah, blah, blah. And in the documentary, his parents just kept bringing up stuff. Like whenever asked about him, they'd be like, oh yeah, well, Chris loved that car. Or we tried to get them this new one, but he didn't take it. I guess he just loved his old car so much. Or they talk about how great of an entrepreneur he was and how well he could make money. And kind of had this superficial idea that kept cropping up of how he conformed to their idea of what success was. And it was so interesting watching Return to the Wild because it was like I was seeing the picture of what Chris was trying to explain in his writings. In 1990, Chris graduated from Emory University with a double major in history and anthropology. And immediately...
Oh, bit of a history buff there, and anthropology. Sounds like a very interesting fella.
Immediately after graduating, Chris donated the entirety of his remaining college fund, which was about $24,000, to the Oxfam charity. And then shortly after this, in the summer of 1990, Chris got into his old Datsun car and just began driving west with no car insurance and an expired license plate. His parents kept trying to get him to make an itinerary, explaining where he's going, how long he'll be there, what his plan is, and every time he just simply said that he's going out west and that's all there was to it. The car turned out to be a lot of trouble as it kept breaking down along his journey. This culminated when he got to a location near the Arizona-Nevada border and a flash flood came and completely destroyed the car. Not deterred, Chris simply got out, packed a backpack full of whatever he could carry on him, and just started walking.
At least he could get out. That sounds really dangerous.
From there, Chris began his sort of vagabond lifestyle as he simply began hitchhiking and walking to wherever he wished to go. Eventually, he found his way to the Sierra Nevada mountains and began staying in and out of hermit camps from 1990 to 1991. There were several abandoned houses within the Sierra Nevada area, and it wasn't common for the people who lived the sort of free living apart from society lifestyle to go stay in those abandoned houses at night or find whatever supplies were available. There was one point during this time that it was later shown Chris broke into an owned house and took some of the food from within the house. However, in other reports that I saw, this house was very dilapidated, so it's quite possible he thought this was just another abandoned structure to walk into and accidentally broke into someone's property.
But why would there be Like what? Cupboard and fridge full of food if it's an abandoned property.
During this time,
You're looking
several
for
people
food, you know
began
it's
to
going to be
pick
there.
up Chris, who was going by the alias of Alexander Supertramp. The last name Supertramp is hilarious because if you're going to be a homeless hitchhiker, you might as well have fun with it. There was one story whenever a woman was driving down the road and he was just set out on a fold-up chair reading a book. So she stops and rolls down her window and says, "Are you a hitchhiker?" And he says, "Yeah, I am." And she says, "Well, you're the worst hitchhiker I've ever seen because you're not even trying. No one's going to give you a ride like that." And he says, "Are you going to give me a ride?" And she says, "Well, I guess so." And he says, "See, now I've got a ride." Everyone who ran into him attests that this carefree lifestyle,
he's a bit sassy,
and attitude followed him wherever he went. Eventually in 1991, he completely ran out of money, so he decided to get a job at a grain elevator in South Dakota. Everyone who worked with him said he was a great guy, and he even struck up a personal friendship with his boss who hired him. However, after a few months of working there, Chris decided he was tired of it, and when leaving, he left a message for his boss that said, "Tramping is too easy with all this money. My days were more exciting when I was penniless and had to forage around for my next meal. I've decided that I'm going to live this life for some time to come."
What a crazy guy. He just loves the life. Itchy feet. He's a nomad at heart. He can't stay too long in one place, can he?
Shortly after this, he made his way to the Colorado River, where at some point he bought a kayak and a handgun. And from there, he just started kayaking the Colorado River, passing several people on guided tours. A lot of these people on guided tours began reporting him to the park services and the police because you're supposed to have a permit to go down the river, and he also wasn't wearing any safety gear. So there were several police officers and park rangers who were searching for him for some time because he was wanted for not having a permit. And there were even several cases where they chased him down the river, but every time he managed to get away. It seems that during this time,
I can imagine the music in the background of that playing out, like a theme from Yogi Bear.
he rationed out his money and would visit things like small general stores for food. There's not any record that he was hunting at this point, and it seems that the handgun that he didn't have a lot of ammo was simply so he didn't get robbed or attacked by some animal. One day while kayaking, he decided to go underneath a dam spillway and ended up crossing the American-Mexican border. After realizing what he had done and also realizing that there were waterfalls ahead that he couldn't kayak across, he decided to get out and carry his kayak back to the United States. However, when crossing a checkpoint at the border, they found his handgun on him and they didn't like that one bit. So for the first and only time, Chris was arrested. But this was only for a few days, and eventually they confiscated his handgun and just let him go with his kayak, I guess, back into the desert. After this, he decided to begin hitchhiking north, and in April of 1992, found himself all the way north in Fairbanks, Alaska. A man who had picked him up before he crossed the border into Canada asked him if there was any way that he could buy Chris a ticket so that he can take a plane to Alaska or do anything besides hitchhike all that way, to which Chris said that was very kind of him, but Chris felt like it was his job and his duty to get there on foot. The people in Fairbanks who met him,
job and duty to get there on foot. He's got some kind of mission in mind, hasn't he? What is it?
Said that while a nice guy, he was very, very weird and also very smelly. Which, having never met Chris in my entire life, I can also confirm that he was definitely weird and smelly. Eventually, on April the 28th of 1992,
weird is subjective,
Chris
but
met
maybe
a man named Jim Gallion and asked Jim to drive him to the Stampede Trailhead, which is a very long hiking trail that wraps around through the Alaskan wilderness. During the drive, Jim noticed that Chris's bag, who, remember, Chris was going by the name Alex at the time, that
Supertramp,
Alex's bag was very lightly packed, and he didn't think that this guy had the means of surviving in the wild. Specifically, Jim could tell that he had very little cold weather gear, very few rations, and almost no real experience. Jim kept pleading with Alex to change his mind and even offered at one point to drive to the next town over so that Jim could buy him real survivalist gear before he drops him off at the trail. Chris/Alex kept saying no and emphasizing that this was just something that he's got to do. However, Jim eventually convinced him to take a pair of wet boots as well as 2 sandwiches and a bag of chips.
This is like some kind of philosophical internal journey, isn't it? Like maybe a spiritual journey. He's very determined. He has to do this. This is just something that he has to do. Not only that, but he has to do it on foot. The people that Chris keeps meeting on these journeys are very, very nice. They're very, very trusting, very, very generous. Everyone seems to kind of fall in love with him as soon as they meet him, which is, you know, maybe a testament to his nice character. You know, he seems very pleasant, if maybe a little bit weird and smelly. Weird is subjective, okay? What one person considers weird, someone else considers incredibly intellectual or interesting.
And that was the last time that Chris McCandless was ever seen alive.
Oh,
the rest of the story, as I'm going to tell it, comes from the various journal entries and notes that Chris took over his 113 days in the Alaskan wilderness. This comes from a specific day chart in which he took notes of what was happening to him every day, as well as little notes and letters that he would write to himself and others in the margins of all of the books that he brought. The supplies that Chris brought with him, other than personal effects and the clothes that he was wearing, were a 10-pound bag of rice, several books, one of which about plants that can be eaten in the wild, and a Remington 22 long rifle with 400 rounds of hollow point ammo. So he was underclothed. 10 pounds of rice, while that may seem like a lot, isn't enough nutrition to sustain you for any real amount of time.
I was going to say, not for that length of time. What, 113 days? Didn't he set off with a sandwich and a bag of potato chips as well?
And while you may have heard the line about 400 rounds of ammo and thought that this guy was armed to the teeth, this is 400 rounds of 22 ammo. So yeah, not that much. Furthermore, this is the size of a 22 bullet, so he wasn't shooting anything other than squirrel with this. Which, that was exactly his plan. He planned to survive off of the rice and small game that he could hunt in the area for an indefinite amount of time. On the 4th day of his journey, Chris came across something that he called the magic bus. In the 40s, whenever the original roadways and trails were being cut out along Alaska, there were several sort of way camps that were set up for the workers. Since it's not really a good idea to try to build anything that far out in the wilderness, they would take mobile units such as a bus and then park them for a while and just leave them for the workers to stay inside of. However, this specific bus broke an axle while it was out there, so since it was too much effort to fix it and bring it back, they just decided to leave it in the middle of the wilderness. And this very bus is the one that Chris had come across and deemed the magic bus.
The magic bus. I mean, that's very fortunate for Chris. Why did he call it the magic bus? I've got visuals of the magic school bus.
From his writings, it seems that Chris's original plan was to just walk through the woods until he hit the Bering Sea. However, it also seems that the woods were much more thick and much more dangerous than he originally assumed, so he decided to just set up his base camp in the magic bus. The bus itself, while a mild shelter, had a cot and wood-fired stove still inside of it. Oh, wow. And for the rest of his journey, Chris just began taking pictures. He's a
cheerful soul, isn't he?
And writing several notes and letters while within the bus itself. His diet consisted mostly of berries that he would find, as well as small game that he would hunt like squirrels, geese, and porcupine. And during the first couple weeks of this journey, it seemed that Chris was enjoying himself and everything was going well. The first big change came on day 43 when somehow he managed to kill a moose. As mentioned before, this isn't doing a whole lot of damage to some.
I was just about to say, with those bullets. Maybe he's better off wrestling it down.
Something the size of a moose. So I don't know if he like fought it with his hands or if he was like hiding in a tree and jumped down on it. I don't know. I just know I'm impressed. I will also mention that several Alaskan troopers and people who have researched this story said that it was in fact not a moose, it was actually a caribou, and he was just dumb, which I don't care. I'm going to give the man credit. If I was out in the middle of the woods for 43 days and I killed something the size of a caribou, I'd say it was a moose too.
I'm not really sure what a caribou is. A little moose.
However, it seems from his journal entries that he didn't know how to properly gut or store the meat from the animal, and most of it ended up going to waste. It seemed at some point, as with most of his journeys, he decided to return back to civilization for a little bit so that he could regroup and maybe get some good food. However, something that he didn't take into account, most likely because he didn't understand the region that he was in, is that the nearby Teklanika River rises regularly during that time of the year.
I was just thinking, this is Alaska. It's very, very big. It's a very big state. Very wild. It's not a lot of Alaska is inhabited. Where exactly would the nearest town be?
Whenever Chris originally crossed the river, it was shallow enough for him to wade across. However, in this time of the year during the summer, the snow begins to melt and the river gets too deep to just walk across, as it would carry you away. Chris tried this at some point, as mentioned in his journal, to which he fell in and nearly froze to death. To add a particularly tragic note to this story, especially if you know where it goes from here, about half a mile from where he tried to cross, there is a hand-operated cable car made specifically so that if someone gets stuck out in the woods, they can make their way across the river. However,
oh no! Do you think his journey to Alaska was improvised? Not thoroughly researched, not, part of the plan? Just, did he have a plan? Was it literally just, I'm gonna go from place to place, see where my feet take me type thing?
Again, Chris didn't have a map or knowledge of the area and was none the wiser to the fact that salvation was only a couple thousand feet away. The first sign that something was really wrong came on the 69th day, of his journal, in which
I wasn't even thinking anything. But now I am.
Chris said river looked impossible, lonely, scared. Things got even more dire when on the 94th day of his entry, Chris said extremely weak, fault of potato seed, much trouble just to stand up, starving, great jeopardy. Keep the potato seed in mind. We'll talk about it more with a sort of theory section at the end, because if I'm doing a video, there's going to be a theory in there somewhere.
He ate a potato seed, the little green potatoes. They're toxic. Not to be confused with the oh gosh, what are they called? The not the ones you plant. The chitters. No, not the chitting potatoes, but the actual green equivalent of a seed. So it's potato seed. I hope he hasn't eaten those.
But it seems that between not being able to cross the river and now getting sick, things quickly got worse. This was exemplified when on day 100, the entry says, made it, but in weakest condition of life. Death looms as serious threat. Too weak to walk out. Have literally became trapped in the wild. During this time, he continued to take pictures of the scenery and himself, while also recording notes within his books. One of the notes that was found that was believed to be near the end of Chris's life said, "Happiness only real when shared." Now, some people have interpreted that to be a tragedy, that at the end of his life, Chris realized he needed people around him, while others have interpreted it as he always shared his happiness or his energy with those he came into contact with, and him sharing his happiness was him doing exactly what he was doing. Either way,
maybe him experiencing the happiness that he felt, before his survival became quite dire. Everything here, while he was traveling and exploring, maybe he's saying, this is the happiness that I found within myself, and I'm going to share it because I'm going to document it, and I because it's nothing without sharing it with at least someone else. Maybe
the situation became dire enough that he left a message on the door of the bus for any hunters or people who may pass by. The message read, "Attention, possible visitors. SOS, I need your help. I am injured, near death, and too weak to hike out. I'm all alone. This is no joke. In the name of God, please remain to save me. I am out collecting berries close by and shall return this evening. Thank you, Chris McCandless. August." I should also mention that this is the first time in any of his travels that Chris used his real name. The final entry in his logbook was on day 107, which simply read,
I think that's because he thinks unless somebody finds me out here, I think I'm, you know, I've met my end, and this is my name, maybe to inform family, friends that this is what's happened to him, so he hasn't just vanished off the face of the earth. Possibly. That would be my way of thinking, I think.
Beautiful blueberries. Days 108 to 112 all had dashes through them, which would normally indicate that nothing occurred during that day, until finally day 113 was left completely blank. Shortly before day 113, Chris took a final picture. It was of himself holding a note that was later discovered on the bus along with his remains.
I mean, he looks cheerful enough as ever. I think this was the thumbnail that I've seen. That made me think he was a 200-year-old frontiersman. Such an idiot. He looks very cheerful, in good spirits here. If anything, maybe a little bit on the skinny side, if he's not sustaining himself too well in the wilderness.
The note he was holding read, "I've had a happy life and thank the Lord. Goodbye and may God bless all." On September 6th of 1992, a group of hunters were walking through the Alaskan wilderness when they came across the magic bus. After walking inside, they immediately smelled something that they assumed to be a rotting animal carcass. However, after looking around, they found curled up in a sleeping bag at the back of the bus was the body of Chris McCandless. The coroner placed his time of death as being about 2 weeks before the hunters discovered him. So if Chris could have added another 14 days to that 113 days, he might have made it.
I think he tried as hard as he possibly could. I don't think he could have done any more. I think maybe he's given himself some kind of sickness by eating potato seeds, possibly. So maybe that accelerated his malnutrition. Maybe.
Chris died around August the 23rd of 1992 at 24 years old. His body, when it was found, weighed only 67 pounds. This leads into the theories about particularly why he died. The coroner's report said that it was of starvation, which would make sense. However, he would have starved to death in about 2 weeks. While certainly not impossible, it is unlikely for someone in Chris's physical condition who also had access to fresh water. The main clue we have is the entry in his journal that said he got sick from potato seeds. Now, while it always could have been something with those particular potato seeds, it's also possible that he may have eaten wild sweet pea seeds, which look similar to wild potato seeds, but if ingested in large amounts, become poisonous.
Again, not the tubers, chitters, not the tuber potatoes that you plant and then they grow into the plants, and then they produce off the actual vine. It's the potato seeds, isn't it? Those little green, not like green tomatoes, and you do not eat them. They are toxic. I don't know if it's a case of how many can you eat before the toxins accumulate in your system. I don't know. I don't know how toxic they are, but it's likely that, at the very least, it could have given him quite an extreme sickness and diarrhea type thing, which if he's already suffering from malnutrition because his diet is so limited out in the wilderness here, that maybe would have accelerated his deterioration, his starvation.
Other primary theory people have with it is something known as rabbit starvation. So for those that don't know, if you eat an exclusively lean meat diet, you can still starve to death. The reason being, if you consume exclusively protein that has no fats on it or anything that can also supplement different nutritional requirements of your body, you can starve to death on a full stomach. The reason being, you have all the protein to process that your body needs if you exclusively consume lean animals like rabbits or squirrels or other things that don't have a lot of fat on them. But
I suppose even if you were dieting, and you're only eating lean meats, you're still going to get fruit and vegetables. You're going to get a source of carbohydrates. So I didn't know that.
Your body isn't getting the required acids and vitamins that it needs in order to process that protein. So even though you have plenty of it there, your body can't do anything with it. And like I said, you die on a full stomach. I believe that it was most likely a combination of the two, and that's the reason his body became so emaciated before his death.
Yeah.
Because if he was to be on an exclusively lean meat diet, then his body was running out of means of producing fuel for his system.
Yeah, energy.
And then you combine that with possibly eating bad potato seeds or sweet pea seeds and getting poisoned, and your body isn't strong enough to fight back against it. And at the same time, a lot of people say he was just dumb and may have been starving for weeks beforehand and just not mentioned it in his journal. I don't think he was like a dumb survivor by any means. Sure, he was dumb for not understanding the territory he walked into, but 113 days in the Alaskan wilderness is still pretty impressive.
I mean, what's the name of the animal that he thought was a moose? I forgot what it's even called. I want to say capybara. It's not a caribou. A caribou. Okay, even if he's wrongly identified the moose, maybe it was caribou. Okay. I mean, this is 1992, did he say, or 93? We can learn skills these days from watching YouTube videos. It's a lot easier for us to access random information that, unless it's specifically taught to you, you're not going to have this skill set in the early 90s. Now, arguably, you can pretty much learn anything from YouTube. I have learned so many weird things from just watching how-to videos and DIY. But, you know, you don't have that back in the early 90s. So I think, you know, he did a good job. Yeah.
Or otherwise. He was eating something to keep him alive up to the 113 days, so I wouldn't exactly write him off as just an idiot. I mean, he was definitely an idiot in some regards, but not entirely. However, this certainly isn't the end of Chris's influence. As soon as it came out that a man had given up everything he had in order to walk into the woods and die in a magic school bus, some people became very interested. So interested, in fact, it became common practice along the Stampede Trail for groups of people to make the hike out to the magic bus. So many people did this, in fact, that they began calling the journey the McCandless Pilgrimage. However, the Alaskan State Police were not happy with this pilgrimage at all, as they had to rescue a total of 15 people who got stuck while trying to make their way out to the bus, and 2 people drowned in the same river Chris had trouble crossing, because again, they were trying to make their way out to the bus.
So, yeah, I understand wanting to imitate the pilgrimage, yes. Especially for, you know, philosophical reasons, personal, moral reasons. Okay. I understand that, but you need to look at the facts. Like, Chris didn't survive his pilgrimage, this journey that he absolutely had to go on. And if you repeat the pilgrimage, you're going to encounter the same problems. The river. Just the vast wilderness, being stranded out in the wild, starvation. What I imagine to be a very harsh climate as well. I imagine it's very cold. Yeah, you know, come on, guys. You need to be sensible. We need to think of these things.
Eventually, the Alaskan National Guard flew in a Chinook helicopter to pick up the bus and bring it out of the woods. And on September 24th of 2020, Alaska University in Fairbanks announced that they would host a permanent display for the magic bus. However, before that bus was moved, Chris's father placed a plaque on the back of it.
I feel like Chris would want that to read Alexander Supertramp, because he seems quite pleased with his nickname, Supertramp. It should read it.
Which read as follows: Christopher Johnson McCandless, also known as Alex, February of 1968 to August of 1992. Chris, our beloved son and brother, died here during his adventurous travels in search of how he could best realize God's great gift of life. Aww. With this final message, I have had a happy life, and thank the Lord. Goodbye, and may God bless all. We commend his soul to the world. The McCandless Family, July of 1993. During a goodbye letter he wrote to a high school friend, Chris said the quote, "I now walk into the wild." And this phrase, "into the wild," became the title of the book that was written about him, as well as the eventual movie adaptation by Sean Penn. And as far as things directly related to Chris, that's the story. But one of the more interesting things to me when reading the story is the amount of people who absolutely hate Chris. For example, this is a question to an Alaskan park ranger who was asked for his feelings regarding Chris, to which the park ranger said, "When you consider McCandless from my perspective, you quickly see that what he did wasn't even particularly daring, just stupid, tragic, and inconsiderate. First off, he spent very little time learning how to actually live in the wild. He arrived at the Stampede Trail without even a map of the area. If he had a good map, he could have walked out of his predicament. Essentially, Chris McCandless committed suicide." And that's not the only one. The author Craig Medred of Anchorage Daily News straight up called McCandless a thief and a bum. There's a lot of people who are furious by his stupidity and hate the idea of somebody accomplishing what he did and feel like that he was a failure for not braving the wilderness and becoming this sort of survivor man. But I don't really think that was ever Chris's intent. Do you remember that final note that he wrote before he died? The one that said he was thankful to God for the life he lived? Well, he wrote that on the back of a torn out page from one of the books he was reading. And on the other side of that page was an excerpt from a poem called "Wise Men in Their Bad Hours" by Robin Jeffers. And the excerpt of that poem reads, "Death is a fierce meadowlark, but to die, having made something more equal to the centuries than muscle and bone, is mostly to shed weakness. The mountains are dead stone. The people admire or hate their stature, their insolent quietness. The mountains are not softened nor troubled, and a few dead men's thoughts have the same temper." I love that poem, particularly the ending, because that idea that there are a few dead men who are completely unbothered by what the world may think of them are the exact same as some mountains. The mountains don't care if people love or despise them because they simply stand in solitude, and a few men's thoughts are the same way. What's even more insightful about that poem is that that's just the final stanza. If you look up the entire thing, it's actually about how wise men despise stupid people. And they despise stupid people because whenever a stupid person comes to die, that is their thoughts described in the final stanza. See, it's saying that wise men, whenever they come to die, they have all these thoughts of what I could have done more, and I didn't get it to live life entirely, and blah, blah, blah. Whereas the stupid people, they're the ones that are these mountains. They're the ones whose thoughts are not moved by those around him. And whenever I hear these stories of park rangers and survivalists and news reporters talking about how stupid and dumb and awful Chris was, I can't help but feel in the same way as he wrote on the back of this poem that he is one of those dead men whose thoughts are not bothered by what other people think of him.
It's a very interesting poem. I think that's pretty harsh. To write him off as just being stupid. Yes, maybe naive, maybe unprepared. But I don't think that's fair to write off what he did as stupid. I mean, I think to claim that you think he's stupid is to claim to know what his intentions were or why he went out here. Which I don't think anyone other than Chris is really aware of. I don't really know what his intentions were going out here. I don't know whether it was a spiritual pilgrimage or, going to find himself. I think you make a lot of assumptions by just writing him off as being stupid. It's totally unfair.
And I will concede this. From a logical perspective, Chris was an idiot. It was a very dumb idea to walk into the Alaskan wilderness with no knowledge of the area, of how to get out of it, when the river's going to rise, and undersupplied. But
underprepared, yes, absolutely, in every way. Underprepared, no map, no appropriate clothing, not enough food, although he could have maybe not have been intending to stay out there as long as he did, arguably.
But again, I don't think Chris's purpose was to be a survivor man. I think his purpose was to experience life in the most absolute sense up until life overcame him. Chris really seemed to me like a man past his time. If you were to take Chris McCandless and you were to drop him in the days of the frontier or the days of the great explorers, of people who sailed across oceans and people who led expeditions into the middle of the jungle, you would find a mini Chris McCandless. But because Chris was born in the modern age, the world wasn't built for him. It wasn't built for the type of people who do away with all progress that society has made in the sake of technology and comfort. And it's not ready for people who just want to experience life in the most absolute qualities.
Yeah, he's an old soul that's still years ahead of his time. That is a completely conflicting thing to say. I know what I mean. Yeah, I think he just has a different attitude towards life that just isn't, what the majority of us have. So it's maybe a little bit tricky to understand. Poor Chris.
I've heard about this story for a long time, right? But whenever I was going through and researching and writing down all the details for this video, it kept ringing in my head over and over how similar this is to Walden. Walden, if you don't know, is a poem by Henry David Thoreau in which Thoreau talks about why he went and lived in the middle of the woods, because to him that was the only true way to live. And sure enough, while I was reading McCandless' journal on day 60, it says that he finished Walden. The excerpt from Walden that has always stuck out to me is this: I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life and see if I could not learn what it had to teach, and not, when I came to die, discover that I had not lived. Two people like Thoreau and two people like McCandless, living required some sense of struggle or some sense of passion to it. Similar to whenever Chris left the grain elevator he was working at, and similar to whenever he left college with a double major because he didn't want a lifestyle that supported his existence. He wanted to absolutely define and control the reason for his existence.
I think it's that human desire that we all have it to some degree of wanting to be closer to nature. And I think some people feel it on a kind of spectrum a lot more than others do. It's a spectrum and we're all on there. But, in Chris's case, he's maybe at the far end of this spectrum of wanting to be closer to nature, took it to more of an extreme and wants to experience everything nature has to offer in its absolute purest form, just in its rawest form. And yeah, I mean, I get it. I understand it.
And again, yeah, logically he's dumb. You can think I'm dumb for thinking all of this. It's perfectly fine. And I'm sure that to some degree, Chris and I are both stupid. The author who wrote the original book about Chris described his story as a sort of Rorschach test, that you can lay out all the details, and like a Rorschach blotch, it's entirely up to the reader to figure out if they think Chris was some kind of folklore hero or just a really dumb idiot who's gotten overhyped. No, but similar to what Thoreau said in Walden, I feel like Chris lived more in his 24 years of life than most people ever will. That's really one of the reasons that I've always loved this story so much, because of every sense of logic and reason that we understand. It absolutely makes no sense. This guy just walked into the woods and he died inside a bus. But who knows?
Well, I think it doesn't make sense because you're not able to think like him. So, yeah, by contrast, it looks like he's crazy. But if you try and view things through his perspective, it's not as crazy. Not many 24-year-olds have these kind of desires and ambitions. So, I do think he's, I want to say ahead of his time, but at the same time, I think he's quite an old soul as well.
No, you can call me crazy, but I've always felt like the story of the man who walked out of our world and into one of his own making was a story worth telling. But of course, you could think that all of that is dumb. You could think that I'm dumb. You could think that Chris is dumb. We're probably both dumb.
If you like.
But regardless, you're here right now, and I just want to say thank you for watching. Thank you all so much for sticking around this far into the video.
Thank you for the story.
That's so cool to me that I can just talk about whatever I want to talk about, that it can go from a 3-hour video explaining trees and James Dean as president to whatever weird analysis thing this is. And that's so cool to me. I love the support that you all give me. It's really a blessing. And thank you all so much for that. Like I've said, I've been waiting kind of passively for Chris to come along in something. I figured he'd show up in a missing persons thing or something about the woods or whatever, but he never did. And I decided, you know what, before this year's over, I want to talk about him, so I'm going to talk about him. Because like I said, it's a story that's always kind of intrigued me, and I felt like it was worth telling. So if you're stuck around this long, hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully you also thought it was interesting or at least entertaining in some regard. Yes. And thank you for sticking around this long. It means the most.
So humble.
Thank you all so much for just the support on the last video. It, like, whenever you're working on a project that long, like with the research and with editing and everything, like, you know, you spend a couple weeks on one video that comes out to be 3 hours long. And there's this worry in your head that, oh man, this is going to tank the channel. No, everyone's going to hate this. They're going to think this was the worst thing ever, blah, blah, blah. But every time you guys prove me wrong. And thank you so much for that. I'm glad that you all liked it. It's currently the highest performing video in the history of my channel. And that is thanks to you all. It's really cool that I can do something like that. And you all are still there for it. And it warms my heart. Thank you so much. One announcement before we continue. This little dude, Winda Dude, at the time this video is going up, there's going to be like 5 or 6 days left to get him, and then he'll be on forever.
Oh, this is an old video. If
you're interested in that. Thank you all so much for the support on the channel as a whole. I think we're at 875,000 subscribers.
Woo!
It's wild. At the beginning of this year, I had, I think, 1,000. May have been more like 800. No, I think I broke 1,000 end of last year. So it was around like 1,500 or 2,000 subs at the beginning of 2021, and now I'm at 875,000. It's insane, and it's all thanks to you all. Thank you for the blessing that you have been to me. It really does mean more than I could ever say. While I'm giving thanks, thank you so much to my top tier patrons that you can see here, and thank you to all of my patrons. You guys are the reason this channel is allowed to continue and continue to thrive on. If it wasn't for the support in that regard, I wouldn't be able to dedicate as much time to the channel as I do. And this is here because of you guys, and it really does mean the most to me. So thank you so much for that. I hope that you enjoyed this. As far as future videos, like I said, this was a semi-vacation because I just finished the serial killer stuff and then a 3-hour breakdown of trees. And then I'm about to get into the conspiracy iceberg finale, and I want that to be special. So this was like a pause in a sense. But yeah, look forward to that. I may or may not do a Christmas video, kind of back and forth on it. I really don't think I can ever top the Christmas with the Cranks video, so there's no point in trying. But in all seriousness, thank you for sticking around this long. I hope that you enjoyed, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!
Bye!
Hello?
He's such a humble guy. He says thank you for everyone for watching, like about 5 times every video. Wendigoon is living his best life. I think he's actually, his purpose in life is to inform people of these weird and wonderful topics. And he explains things so well. Like I say, it's that passion that kind of comes through. And it's wonderful just listening to him talk. Maybe it's just me because I am a talker, as you all know. I don't stop. I'm pretty sure I talk in my sleep as well. Anyway, a very, very interesting, it's not really a story, is it? It's a real life story. It's a real life person that I can't believe he met his end here. It's so sad. The message that he was kind of carrying across to people is, I think, an important one. I don't think he was stupid. I think that's, no, I don't think that's fair. Unprepared, yes. Naive, probably. What he wanted to do, I mean, only Chris McCandless can decide what he wants to do and why he, you know, he wants to do it so much. It's very sad that this happened to him in the end. I think I would probably go with probably the theory, the potato seeds. If it is those little green potato seeds, pretty sure they're toxic. And I think that's probably exacerbated the malnutrition. And then maybe with the lean meats, with the protein diet, that was talked about as well, probably hand in hand. Oh, that it's devastating to know that just 2 weeks later he was discovered. But the whole concept of living free and, giving away your material possessions because you don't need them. Why have you got attachment to them? I like the message. It makes you think. Thought-provoking video. So thank you very much for requesting this, Joe Crazy. Another absolute banger. Thank you, my lovely. And I hope you enjoyed watching along with it. If you're still here, it's another long video. Take care of yourselves, my lovelies. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.